I finally stopped being her clown husband and walked away from years of mockery to reclaim my self-respect in a shocking twist of empowerment revealed. It was supposed to be a normal evening at our friend's dinner party, until I heard the familiar laughter echoing from the kitchen. Not the kind that warms your heart, but the type that makes it sink. Standing frozen in the hallway, I listened as my wife of 7 years entertained everyone with her favorite topic: me. "You should have seen him trying to assemble that bookshelf last weekend," she said with laughter. "I swear I married a complete clown. He couldn't tell the difference between a screwdriver and a hammer if his life depended on it." The group erupted in laughter as she continued. "Sometimes I wonder if he does it on purpose, like he's performing for an audience. But no, that's just who he is, my personal circus act. 12 years together, 7 of them married, and this was how she saw me, a clown, her punchline." I stood there, glass of wine trembling slightly in my hand, as the reality I had been denying for years finally crystallized. This wasn't the first time. Looking back, there were countless dinner parties, family gatherings, and social events where I became the unwitting star of her comedy routine. I had always laughed along, believing it was harmless teasing between partners. But something shifted that night. Perhaps it was the dismissive tone in her voice or the realization that she truly meant every word. Later that evening, while scrolling through social media, I discovered dozens of posts where she had shared our private moments, transforming my mistakes and vulnerabilities into entertainment for her online audience. Living with a clown has its perks. Free entertainment daily. #clownhusband. #never a dull moment. Read one post with hundreds of likes and comments from people I didn't even know. The drive home that night was silent. She asked what was wrong, but I couldn't bring myself to confront her yet. My thoughts were racing, reviewing our relationship through this new lens. How many times had I missed the signs? How often had I allowed my dignity to be sacrificed for her amusement? That night, lying awake beside her sleeping figure, I made a decision. If she wanted a clown, she had certainly found one, someone who had foolishly believed that love meant accepting disrespect. But if she thought I wasn't serious enough, I would show her just how serious I could be about one thing: leaving. The next morning, I woke up with a clarity I hadn't felt in years. No dramatic confrontations or emotional outbursts. Instead, I began meticulously planning how to reclaim my self-respect. First step, I called my old college friend, who had been offering me a position at his firm for years, a job I had declined because my wife had laughed it off as too ambitious for someone like me. As I hung up the phone with a meeting scheduled for the following week, I caught a glimpse of myself in the mirror. For the first time in years, I didn't see the punchline to someone else's joke. I saw a man ready to stop performing in a one-sided circus. Over the next week, I became hyper-aware of patterns I'd previously ignored. Each morning at breakfast, a subtle jab about my choice of clothes. During phone calls with her mother, hushed giggles followed by "I'll tell you later" when I walked into the room. Even in text messages to friends, which I accidentally glimpsed, mockery about how I loaded the dishwasher like a confused child. These weren't isolated incidents. This was a consistent pattern of disrespect that had become so normalized I hadn't recognized it for what it was. When you hear something often enough, even the most absurd idea can begin to feel like truth. And for years, I had been internalizing the idea that I was somehow less competent, less serious, and less worthy of respect. My meeting with my college friend went exceptionally well. The position he offered would mean a significant step up from my current job. More responsibility, better pay, and most importantly, recognition of skills my wife had convinced me I didn't possess. I accepted on the spot, promising to give notice at my current position immediately. That evening, I decided to have a genuine conversation with her. Perhaps there was something salvageable here, some misunderstanding that could be resolved through honest communication. I waited until after dinner, when we were both relaxed on the couch. "I need to talk to you about something that's been bothering me," I began, keeping my voice level. "At the dinner party last week, and actually for a long time now, I've noticed you tend to make jokes at my expense, calling me a clown, making fun of me to our friends and family." She looked up from her phone, surprise flashing across her face before settling into an amused smile. "Are you serious right now? That's just how we joke around. Everyone does it. You're being way too sensitive." "It doesn't feel like joking to me," I continued. "It feels like you don't respect me. And I found all those social media posts too." She rolled her eyes dramatically. "Oh, please. Those get tons of likes. People think they're hilarious. It's not a big deal." "It's a big deal to me," I insisted. "How would you feel if I constantly made you the butt of jokes? If I publicly undermined you?" "That's different," she scoffed. "You're just You know, you're kind of a goofy guy. That's what everyone loves about you. Don't try to be someone you're not." In that moment, I realized two crucial things. First, she genuinely didn't see anything wrong with her behavior. Second, she had no intention of changing it. The conversation continued in circles, with her alternating between dismissing my concerns and suggesting I was overreacting. By the end, she promised half-heartedly to think about it, but her tone made it clear she considered the matter trivial. That night, I created a private document outlining my plan. I would give her 1 month to demonstrate genuine change. During that time, I would prepare for all possibilities. I opened a separate bank account the next day and deposited my first paycheck from the new job there. I researched apartments in the area. I consulted with a lawyer to understand my options. Some might call these steps extreme, but they weren't about revenge. They were about self-preservation, about finally becoming serious enough to protect myself from further emotional damage. As I closed my laptop that night, I felt neither anger nor sadness, just a steady resolve to reclaim the dignity I had surrendered for far too long. The transformation began subtly. My new position required a wardrobe upgrade, so I replaced my dated clothes with tailored suits that commanded respect in the boardroom. When she commented that I looked like a kid playing dress-up, I simply smiled and walked out the door. No reaction, no defense, no wounded look she could use to reaffirm her narrative about me. At work, I thrived. Years of suppressing my ideas and second-guessing my abilities melted away as colleagues responded positively to my contributions. Within 3 weeks, I successfully negotiated a contract that brought in substantial new business. The regional director personally called to congratulate me, mentioning potential for further advancement. At home, I implemented boundaries with quiet determination. When she attempted to interrupt me during calls with belittling gestures meant to make me lose my train of thought, I simply moved to another room and closed the door. When she tried to help me with tasks by taking over and sighing dramatically at my apparent ineptitude, I calmly stated, "I've got this," and continued without acknowledging her theatrical frustration. The changes weren't just professional. I reconnected with old friends she had dismissed as boring or too serious for our social circle. Weekly basketball games and occasional fishing trips gave me space to rebuild my identity outside our relationship. These friends noticed the difference immediately, commenting on my renewed confidence and focus. Her reaction to these changes evolved in predictable stages, first confusion, then irritation, followed by increasingly desperate attempts to restore the previous dynamic. She tried provoking reactions with sharper criticisms, but when those failed to land, she switched tactics. "You're working too much," she complained one evening. "We never spend time together anymore." "Don't you care about our marriage?" "I care deeply about mutual respect in our marriage," I replied evenly. "That's why I'm making these changes." Her eyes widened slightly at the implication. For perhaps the first time, she realized something fundamental had shifted. Later that night, she approached with a different strategy. Affection and reminiscence about how things used to be, accompanied by suggestions that my new attitude was creating distance between us. I acknowledged the distance, but didn't accept responsibility for it. "I'm still the same person," I explained. "I'm just no longer willing to be the punchline to your jokes." The following weekend, she organized a dinner with friends, the same group from the party where I'd overheard her clown comments. Throughout the evening, I noticed her watching me nervously, particularly whenever conversation turned toward our relationship or my work. When someone asked about my recent promotion, she quickly interjected, "Oh, he's gotten so serious lately, barely has time for fun anymore. Remember how he used to be the life of the party?" The table grew awkwardly silent, sensing the tension beneath her words. I took a sip of water and responded calmly, "I still enjoy having fun. I've just realized there's a difference between being laughed with and being laughed at." Several guests nodded in understanding while she flushed deeply. Later that night, she accused me of embarrassing her in front of our friends. The irony wasn't lost on me, but I didn't point it out. Instead, I asked a simple question: "Do you respect me?" Her hesitation before answering told me everything I needed to know. The carefully crafted response that followed, full of deflections and qualifications, only confirmed what I had already decided. The 1-month timeline I had given for change was halfway expired, and nothing substantive had improved. If anything, her resistance to my evolution had only strengthened my resolve. That night, I finalized the lease on an apartment across town, not as a dramatic gesture or ultimatum, but as a necessary step toward whatever came next. The pieces were falling into place for a decisive exit from a relationship that had slowly eroded my sense of self-worth over years. The man who had once accepted being called a clown was disappearing, replaced by someone who understood his own value. 2 weeks into my new job, I received my first substantial commission check. Instead of depositing it into our joint account as I would have done previously, I transferred it to my private account. That same afternoon, I met with a financial advisor to discuss separating our entangled finances with minimal disruption. The meeting was productive but sobering. Untangling 7 years of shared assets would be complicated. At home, the emotional distance between us grew more pronounced. Our conversations became purely transactional, discussions about household bills, scheduling matters, surface-level pleasantries. I no longer shared details about my workday or sought her opinion on decisions. This shift wasn't petty retaliation, it was self-protection from someone who had consistently used my vulnerabilities as comedy material. She noticed the change and vacillated between different strategies to regain control. Some days she attempted reconciliation through small gestures, cooking my favorite meals or suggesting weekend getaways to reconnect. Other days she reverted to subtle digs and passive-aggressive comments, testing whether I would fall back into old patterns of appeasement. "The kitchen sink is leaking again," she mentioned one evening. "But I guess you're too important with your fancy new job to fix it now. Should I call a real handyman?" 3 months ago, that comment would have triggered an immediate response, either defensive justification or an eager attempt to prove my competence by fixing it immediately. Instead, I nodded and replied, "That's a good idea. I'll transfer money for a professional to handle it." Her momentary expression of disappointment revealed everything. She hadn't actually wanted the sink fixed. She had wanted to provoke a reaction that would reaffirm her narrative about me. The following weekend, we attended her cousin's wedding. Throughout the reception, I noticed her watching me carefully, particularly when we interacted with family members who hadn't seen us in months. When her uncle asked about my career change, I spoke confidently about the new position and recent successes. "He's been so serious lately," she interjected with a laugh that didn't reach her eyes. "Sometimes I miss my funny clown who used to make everyone laugh." The table fell silent. Her uncle looked uncomfortable, glancing between us. I maintained my composure, sipping champagne before responding, "I've found there's a time and place for humor, especially in professional settings. Speaking of which, how's your real estate business going?" The conversation shifted naturally, but the tension remained. Later that evening, as we drove home in silence, she finally confronted the elephant in the room. "What's happening to us? You're like a stranger lately. Is this still about those jokes? Because I've been trying to cut back on those." "Have you?" I asked quietly. "Because you called me a clown again tonight in front of your entire family." "That was different. I was just saying I miss your fun side." She paused, then added with clear frustration, "You're overreacting to everything these days. It's like walking on eggshells around you." The irony of her statement wasn't lost on me. For years, I had been the one carefully monitoring my behavior to avoid becoming the subject of her next punchline. Now that I had stopped accepting that dynamic, she felt uncomfortable. "I don't want you walking on eggshells," I explained calmly. "I just want basic respect, the kind I've always given you." When we arrived home, she attempted to diffuse the tension by suggesting we watch a movie together. I declined politely, explaining I needed to prepare for an early meeting. In reality, I spent 2 hours in our home office finalizing arrangements for the apartment I had leased and scheduling movers for the following weekend, when she would be visiting her sister. The next morning, I received a text from her during a conference call. "Dinner at Antonio's tonight. I made reservations for 7. We need to talk." Antonio's was where we had our first date 12 years ago. The choice of location wasn't accidental. It was a strategic attempt to invoke nostalgia and emotional connection. I confirmed the reservation and returned to my meeting, already knowing that tonight would likely determine whether there was anything left to salvage in our relationship. Antonio's hadn't changed much in 12 years. The same warm lighting, the same red checkered tablecloths, the same framed photographs of Venice adorning the walls. Our usual table in the corner was waiting, along with a bottle of the Chianti we'd shared on our first anniversary. She had clearly planned this evening carefully, down to requesting our regular server. We made small talk through appetizers, discussing mutual friends and upcoming holidays. She seemed nervous, laughing too loudly at inconsequential comments and refilling her wine glass more frequently than usual. Only when our entrees arrived did she finally broach the real purpose of our dinner. "I've been doing a lot of thinking," she began, setting down her fork. "About us, about the way things have been lately." She reached across the table for my hand, which I allowed her to take. I miss us, the way we used to be. Which version of us do you miss exactly? I asked quietly. Her brow furrowed slightly. What do you mean? Before all this tension? Before you started pulling away? I took a slow sip of water, organizing my thoughts. This conversation was inevitable, and I had prepared for it. I've been reflecting a lot on our relationship, on patterns I didn't recognize for years. From my jacket pocket, I withdrew my phone and opened a document I had compiled over the past month. I've been keeping track. You've referred to me as your clown 17 times in public settings. You've mocked my abilities or intelligence in front of others 23 times. You've posted 9 social media updates making me the punchline. Her expression shifted from confusion to defensiveness. You've been counting? That's a little extreme, don't you think? They're just jokes. They stopped being jokes when I asked you to stop and you continued anyway, I replied evenly. They stopped being jokes when I realized they reflected your actual opinion of me. She withdrew her hand from mine, her voice taking on an edge. So what? Now you're too good for a little teasing? Everyone in relationships jokes about their partners. You're being oversensitive. Is that why you brought me here tonight? To tell me I'm being oversensitive? She sighed dramatically. No, I brought you here to reconnect, to remember what we had before you got this chip on your shoulder. She gestured vaguely toward me. Before you started acting like you're better than everyone else with your new job and your new clothes and your new friends. The accusation was telling. My crime wasn't changing, it was changing in ways she couldn't control or diminish. I placed my napkin beside my plate and looked directly at her. I've signed a lease on an apartment across town. I'm moving out this weekend. The color drained from her face. You're what? You can't be serious. I'm completely serious. I've consulted with a lawyer about divorce proceedings, though I haven't filed yet. Her shock quickly morphed into anger. You've been planning this behind my back while pretending everything was normal? Who does that? I needed time to think clearly without emotional manipulation or pressure. I needed to be certain this was the right decision. And is it? She demanded, voice rising enough that nearby diners glanced our way. Is this really what you want? To throw away 12 years over some jokes? I remained calm despite her escalating emotion. This isn't about jokes. It's about respect. It's about partnership. It's about whether we bring out the best in each other or the worst. So that's it. You're just leaving. Tears welled in her eyes. After everything we've built? I'm leaving because we've built something unhealthy. Something that diminishes rather than elevates. Something where one person's dignity is sacrificed for another's amusement. The conversation that followed was raw and painful. She cycled through anger, disbelief, bargaining, and finally a desperate plea for another chance. She promised therapy, changes, a completely new dynamic between us. Perhaps 3 months ago, I would have accepted those promises. Now I recognize them as crisis responses rather than genuine understanding. As we left the restaurant, she attempted one last approach. Remember when we first came here? You were so nervous you knocked over your water glass. We laughed about it for weeks. Yes, I replied quietly. We laughed about it because you found it endearing then, not because you were using it to establish superiority or entertain others at my expense. The drive home was silent except for her occasional sniffling. When we arrived, she asked if there was anything she could say or do to change my mind. I considered the question carefully before answering. I need to see actions, not promises. I need to see that you understand why this happened, not just that you want to prevent it from happening. That night, as she slept fitfully beside me, I finalized the last details of my departure, not with satisfaction or vindication, but with the solemn recognition that sometimes the most serious decision you can make is to walk away from someone who can't see your worth. Moving day arrived with unexpected clarity. While she visited her sister as planned, I efficiently transferred my essential belongings to the new apartment. No dramatic emptying of closets or splitting of shared possessions yet. That would come later. For now, I took only what was unquestionably mine: clothes, personal documents, family heirlooms, and the tools from my grandfather I'd always treasured. The apartment was smaller than our house, but felt expansive in its simplicity. Minimal furniture, clean lines, no clutter of accumulated compromises. As I arranged my books on newly assembled shelves, I realized I was creating not just a living space, but a physical manifestation of my reclaimed identity. When she returned that evening and discovered my partial departure, the expected storm erupted: frantic calls, accusatory texts, even a tearful visit to the apartment where she alternately pleaded and berated. I maintained the boundaries I had established, speaking calmly but firmly about my decision. When she left, slamming the door behind her, I experienced neither triumph nor regret, only the quiet certainty that I was finally prioritizing my own well-being. News of our separation spread quickly through our social circles. Reactions varied predictably. Her closest friends rallied around her narrative of abandonment and betrayal. My family, who had witnessed her belittling behavior for years but remained silent out of respect for my choices, expressed quiet relief. Most surprising were the friends who reached out privately to share that they had always been uncomfortable with how she spoke about me, but hadn't known how to intervene. "We should have said something," admitted one longtime friend over coffee. "But she always made it seem like you were in on the joke, like it was your dynamic as a couple." "I believed that too," I acknowledged, "for far too long." 2 weeks into our separation, she requested a meeting at a neutral location, a park where we used to walk our dog before he passed away last year. She arrived looking different, subdued, without the carefully crafted appearance she typically maintained. We sat on a bench overlooking the pond, watching ducks create ripples across the otherwise still water. "I've been seeing a therapist," she began without preamble, "twice a week since you left." I nodded but remained silent, allowing her space to continue. "She's helping me understand some things about myself, about why I needed to make you smaller to feel secure." She twisted her wedding ring anxiously. "I never thought you would actually leave. I thought we had an understanding." "What kind of understanding did you think we had?" I asked quietly. "That you were okay with it, that it was just our dynamic." She looked down at her hands. "I think I convinced myself you didn't really mind because facing the alternative meant admitting I was hurting you, and I didn't want to be the kind of person who hurts someone they love." For the first time, I heard genuine reflection rather than tactical remorse. Still, recognition wasn't the same as transformation. One therapy session couldn't undo years of ingrained behavior or repair the damaged foundation of our relationship. "I appreciate you sharing that with me," I said finally. "But recognition is just the first step in a very long process." "Does that mean there's hope?" she asked, vulnerability apparent in her voice. "That maybe someday we could try again?" I considered her question carefully, wanting neither to offer false hope nor unnecessary cruelty. "I think we both need time and space to grow individually before we can answer that question. Some lines, once crossed, change relationships permanently." In the weeks that followed, we established a business-like approach to managing our shared responsibilities and beginning the process of disentangling our lives. Through my lawyer, I proposed a fair division of assets that acknowledged both our contributions to the marriage. She initially resisted certain terms, but eventually agreed without the protracted legal battle I had feared. At work, I continued to excel, recently being assigned to lead a team developing our company's expansion into new markets. My apartment gradually became a home with carefully chosen items reflecting my own tastes rather than compromises or defaults. I reconnected with old passions, playing guitar, hiking, cooking elaborate meals just for the pleasure of it. 6 months after moving out, I filed for divorce. The paperwork was straightforward, the legal process uncomplicated by children or significant disputes over property. When we met to sign the final documents, she asked if I was seeing anyone new. I wasn't, but the question revealed she still didn't fully understand. This hadn't been about finding someone else. It had been about finding myself. "I want you to know something," I told her as we prepared to part ways. "I don't hate you. I don't even regret our marriage. But I've learned that respect isn't optional in relationships. It's foundational. Without it, nothing else can stand." She nodded slowly, tears gathering but not falling. "I understand that now. Too late, but I understand." As I walked away from that meeting, I felt an unexpected lightness. The man who had spent years accepting the role of clown in his own life had finally taken his final bow. The future stretched before me, uncertain but full of possibility, and most importantly, on my own terms. Our story has come to an end. If you've made it this far, how about subscribing to our channel? It helps us immensely. I've selected 2 other videos for you that I'm sure you'll enjoy. Feel free to click on them. I'll be waiting for you in the next story. 6 months after the papers were signed, I sometimes wake up at 3 a.m. in the new apartment and still reach across the bed, half expecting to feel her warmth. The sheets are cold, and for a moment the silence feels like punishment. Then I remember, the silence is mine now. It belongs to me. And that realization is the first soft wave of peace that washes over the old ache. I thought leaving would feel like victory. It doesn't. It feels like surviving a slow-motion car crash I didn't know I was in for 12 years. There are days when the anger flares up so hot I have to pull over on the highway just to breathe. Not because I want her back, God, no, but because I'm furious at myself for how long I auditioned for the role of lovable fool just to keep the peace. I gave away pieces of my dignity like they were party favors, smiling while I did it. That betrayal of self hurts worse than anything she ever said. But anger is a visitor now, not a tenant. Most mornings I wake up lighter than I have since college. I make coffee exactly the way I like it, too strong, no sugar, without anyone rolling their eyes. I wear the navy suit that makes me feel sharp without hearing "Who are you trying to impress?" I laugh loud and deep with friends who never needed me to be the punchline to feel good about themselves. I play guitar again until my fingers ache, and no one sighs dramatically because the noise ruins Netflix. Simple things, ordinary things, but they feel like oxygen after years underwater. I'm proud of the man I'm becoming, yet I grieve the man I allowed myself to shrink into. Both truths live in me at once. Some nights I scroll through old photos, us on vacation, arms around each other, grinning like nothing could ever break us, and tears come without warning. Not because I miss her, but because I miss the version of me who still believed love could fix everything if he just tried harder, smiled wider, took one more joke on the chin. That younger me deserved better protection than I gave him. I've learned that self-respect isn't a single dramatic moment of walking out the door. It's 1,000 quiet ones afterward, choosing not to respond to the baiting text, depositing my own money into my own account, saying no without explanation, sitting alone in a restaurant without rushing to fill the silence with someone, anyone, who might make me feel less invisible. Each small no to the old patterns is a brick in a new foundation. I don't hate her anymore. I pity the insecurity that needed to dim someone else's light to feel bright. I hope therapy is teaching her what I couldn't, that real love doesn't require a court jester. It just requires two people willing to see each other clearly, flaws and all, and still choose respect. And me? I'm finally the leading man in my own life. The role is bigger than I expected, heavier some days, but it fits. For the first time in over a decade, when I look in the mirror, I recognize the person staring back. He's not perfect. He's not a clown. He's just a man who decided his worth wasn't negotiable. That, more than any divorce decree, feels like freedom.